Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Luke Deckard Show. I'm your host, Luke Deckard. I hope everyone's well. So, tonight, what am I going to talk about? I have some things to talk about. I want to talk about Star Trek Picard. I and awed about this for a while because, well, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to. I did one stream with an author named Duncan Barrett. We did a Star Trek stream a while ago. The question of the hour was has Star Trek become a self parody, right? And the purpose of that was looking at Discovery and Strange New Worlds, seasons 1 and 2 of Picard. What's the other one? Lower Decks. Looking at all those shows and sort of asking the question: is Star Trek even moving forward, or is it just kind of constantly parodying itself? Going back to things, doing things because it is what the writers or the showrunners think people want from Star Trek, right? And then comparing that to older stuff like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the TOS films and the Next Gen films, and looking at how those didn't really parody the original show. They were very conscious about moving things forward, right? Not constantly wanting to relive the past. And obviously, yes, there were lots of things in and many of the original shows that built off of TOS and reference that. Of Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, brings Khan back, all that kind of stuff. But the thing that like I said, we were talking about was how to become a self parody. Was Star Trek moving forward? And the long and short answer, I think, is no. I didn't think that it was moving forward. Which brings me to tonight, I think. So I'll go into a bit more detail about what I mean, or rather, my journey with Star Trek over these last, I don't know, however many years since Discovery was announced through to today with Picard. But before so that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. Star Trek Picard Series 3 has just come out. 2 episodes have come out, and it's been interesting to watch this show in light of everything that's come before it. And I kind of want to dissect the feelings that I have from watching the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Picard, in light of everything, right? In light of everything. So I suppose I'll go back into my general sort of history with modern Trek. I think in general, I haven't really enjoyed much of it at all. Because I think what I loved so much about the older stuff, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, that stuff, right, was that it wanted to progress the universe. It didn't just want to live in the 23rd century. It was like, no, let's move things forward. Let's go ahead. Let's move to the 24th century. And again, Deep Space Nine picks up sometime, what season, like that's 6 seasons or so into Next Gen before that picks up, and you've got 4 or 5 seasons into DS9 before Voyager, and it's always kind of taking the baton and carrying things further into the future, which I liked. And it never felt like like the universe was progressing. And I remember when Discovery was first announced, I sort of sank inside, and that was because I didn't. We'd already had at least 2, maybe all 3 of the J.J. Abrams universe films had come out, and of those 3 films, I only really liked the first one. The third one is maybe the next best, but in general, they're all subpar for me. They they sort of aren't. I was speaking to my friend Frank of the YouTube channel I Want My TV Now, and we were describing the JJ films as a gateway. They're a gateway drug into Star Trek. And I think that's what worked about the first film. It sort of reminded people about the franchise, rejuvenated a little bit more interest, because by the time Enterprise had come on the scene, it kind of waned. I have to admit I didn't watch religiously all of Enterprise when it was on. It kind of it wasn't fully my cup of tea, but it at least at the beginning. But then towards the end of the series, it actually really started to pick up, which was sort of a bummer, I think, because it was coming to an end just as it was kind of finding its feet, or maybe not finding its feet, but getting a little bit better. Um, so yeah, so the JJ films, I think the first one particularly was a good gateway into Trek. Then of course you get Into Darkness, and Into Darkness I think is Into Darkness I think sets up all of the problems with modern Star Trek. And the problem with Into Darkness is that it was one big gorge of member berries, right? You had Tribbles, you had Khan, you had Carol Marcus. You have all this scenes that are all, rip-offs of Star Trek 2 The Wrath of Khan, right? And it's like, well, I've seen all this stuff before. And then of course you move into, you see what JJ did with Star Wars, and I was not a fan of The Force Awakens, and for the same reason I wasn't a fan of Into Darkness. I was like, well, all JJ is really doing is just ripping off everything that's come before it. He's not actually putting his mind to crafting a new story that's driving things forward. It's kind of taking the easy road, and it is picking, oh well, this bit works from this, oh this bit works from that. We'll just repurpose all this stuff and push it into this new push it into this quote unquote new story. And it's kind of not really like that. Hey Biffer, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Good to see you. Good to see you. Biffer, tonight I'm talking, in case you haven't noticed by the title of the episode, I'm talking about Star Trek Picard, but yeah, kind of building my way up to that. So yeah, so that's what irked me about Into Darkness, is that it was just nothing new, just repeated all of the same beats, all the same stuff that we'd already seen and known from Star Trek history and Star Trek lore. And while I love a good member berry, that's that can be quite fun. And Star Trek Next Generation did that quite well. Every once in a while, there'd be these wonderful little references to the past. They never lingered on it though, which was great. And they never, yeah, it was just these fleeting moments. There might be a couple of references to a name that you understand. I mean, even the restraint that the Next Generation had when they brought McCoy back for the very first episode, Encounter at Farpoint. He's so done in makeup that it's really hard to even know who that is. I would almost say they probably went too far with the makeup, but but it was wonderful. And then they didn't bring back the big guns. They didn't bring back Spock until I think season 5. By the time Star Trek Next Gen was firmly in its roots, firmly was its own thing. And then they brought Scotty back. And so they waited very long into the game before they relied on those massive member berries. And by the time we got to Spock and Scotty, it was wonderful. Loved it. Same way with Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine was what, season 4 or 5 when it was the 30th or 40th anniversary or something like that. I can't remember. When they did that, they went back in time and they kind of merged Deep Space Nine characters with the Trouble with Tribbles episode, which is by far one of my favorite Deep Space Nine episodes. But even throughout Deep Space Nine history, there's the show, they didn't linger on member berries. They just fleeting moments where you kind of understand what they're talking about. Same with Voyager. At one point, they bring back Sulu, and it's a great episode. I love the Sulu episode in Voyager, but again, it's like they waited a good amount of time before they did that. Um, Let me go to the chat real quick. Biffer, you say I saw Picard season 1, loved it, but can't watch it. Damage already done. Plus, it reminded me too much of Babylon 5. Okay, so sorry, you saw the first episode of Picard season 3. So here's the thing, but we're gonna talk about the 2 episodes. I'm gonna spoil episodes 1 and 2 for anyone listening or watching. Biff, I would love for you to watch the first 2 episodes and just tell me what you think, because the damage already done is tricky for me, because I totally get that. I really do. I never could get into Star Trek Discovery. I forced myself to watch the first season, but I didn't watch it when it was like coming out weekly. I tried, got bored. You know, when they just got the Klingons wrong, everything was wrong. It was like that's not how the Klingons would act. They had this like weird respect for bodies and corpses, and it's like that's not the Klingon. That's not Klingons. That's not it. And you get to that stupid finale where like that one lady Klingon is what she's holding she's holding Kronos hostage with her iPad because Starfleet planted bombs in the core of Kronos. Like those are such huge things, and this is what irked me about one of the main things that irked me about Discovery and irked me about the JJ films is we're going back to the past. We're going back to Kirk, Spock, things I remember, these member berries, and we're not progressing forward like we did with Deep Space Nine, Voyager, etc. And as a result, because we're not going into the future to see what came after Voyager, we're muddying the canon. And I think canon is really important. Some people don't think it is, but I legit I believe canon is very important, and you need to respect it quite a lot. And this is coming from a guy who I wrote a few books that are part of a long established character series. And one of the things I did when I was writing these books was I had to make sure that I didn't screw up the canon. I had to make sure that everything fit within the wider picture, right? Because I didn't want to include a character, include a reference or something like that that was out of time. That either happened, too, wasn't quite there yet, or had already, I needed to make sure that everything fit. Um, and Discovery very quickly, very early on, demonstrated that it's for whatever reason didn't seem to the viewer, it seemed like they didn't care, which put a lot of people's back up, right? It's a very easy show to watch if you just turn your mind off and watch it for action, space, adventure. It's a very frustrating show to watch if you're wanting to watch Star Trek seriously. And I think that's kind of been the ongoing problem with new Star Trek is, with Discovery at the end of season 1 where they have Cronus being held hostage and it sort of ends the Klingon War. I'm like, well, when you think about the TOS era and Kirk running into Klingons and stuff like that, you would think the fact that that Starfleet are holding the planet hostage would be a huge moment of contention and would just constantly be a point of crazy unrest, and they would therefore the Federation and the Klingon Empire would never get on. They would never get on because of that. Like seriously, batshit insane. So I didn't like that. And then of course you come to Strange New Worlds. Let me go to the chat real quick. Biffer, you say, I wish to get a Star Trek series that species 8472 are the bad guys and species 8472 is from Star Trek Voyager that lives in the liquid space. My Voyager knowledge is really bad. It's really bad. So I remember the name, but I am struggling to remember species 8472. Let me look it up so I can jog my memory. Um, let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh yes, I remember that. I remember that. Yeah, I mean that could be fun. That could be fun. You want to get a series that's species or the bad guys. I mean, why not? This is one of those things where you're referencing a villain that is not really ultra fleshed out, and could be built upon. And as I was getting into Strange New Worlds, again, that show annoyed me because I mean I watched a little bit of Discovery season 2, and I have to admit the some of the best parts of Discovery season 2 were the Pike stuff. He felt like a real captain. He sort of felt more like a Star Trek captain, like a Star Trek character. Um, you felt like you think he was a good leader. Rebecca Ramon as number one was decent. I kind of liked her. I don't really like the new Spock. I'm sorry, bud. Sorry, dude. I don't. And it was because turning to Spock was such an obvious thing that, I mean, everybody called it, and I think it was hilarious to me that Red Letter Media, were like, oh, in their very early reviews, like, oh, if ratings start to drop, what are they going to do? They're going to bring out Spock, and that's exactly what the show did. It was kind of like, okay, we're doing Spock, we're doing more things, because we gotta, we gotta keep dredging up the past, rather than let any of these characters stand on their own and progress things forward. But it's hard to progress things forward when your whole show is based on this show predates Kirk and Spock and is going to lead up into Kirk and Spock, and you're bringing all these characters that connect to Kirk and Spock. Like, why does Michael Burnham need to be Spock's, you know, sister? That was entirely useless. Why does, you bring in Sarek, you bring in Amanda? You need any of this stuff. You don't need those sorts of connections. It was a sweet moment in Star Trek Generations when when Kirk is visiting the Enterprise B for its maiden voyage, and Sulu's daughter is at the helm. Like, that was cool. I'm fine with that. That was a fun little thing, because you buy like, okay, yeah, Sulu's daughter really wanted to, she was gunning for this just like her dad. That's what she wanted to do, and so that worked. But it was a perfectly wise idea that Next Generation didn't have those obvious links to the original characters. This is a new set of characters. This is what, 80 years later, just go with it. And people did, and it was great. Now, to be fair, the first 2 seasons of Star Trek Next Generation are rocky. Most of the first 2 seasons of all of those shows, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, are rocky, but that's because they're finding their feet. And I know back in the day, people were like, oh yeah, but people hated it back then, just like they hate the new stuff. Yes and no. There was hate for Next Gen and Deep Space Nine at the beginning, and people had, oh, it's all set on a space station, that can't be Star Trek, they're not exploring. There's always going to be people who don't like change, and that frustrates, and they'll be frustrated by that, and they don't want to kind of accept something different. I would rather accept something different than just more of the same. And that was my problem with Discovery and Strange New Worlds. It's more of the same, but it's trying to pretend to be different. But it's not, because all it is relying on more things, where Voyager, Next Gen, DS9 never did that. And I think, again, when you think of Voyager, not Voyager, when you think of Strange New Worlds, they bring the Gorn back. Like, why do you need to bring the Gorn back? There was an interesting video on YouTube, from the Screenwriters Guild or something like that, where they interviewed a bunch of Star Trek writers across the whole thing. Like Brendan Braga was there, guys from Deep Space Nine, were there. Terry Matalas, was on Enterprise, I believe, and is show running Picard series 3, was there. But they also had people from Strange New Worlds and stuff like that, kind of there. And it was interesting. It was really interesting conversation listening to the writers talk. And there was some Gorn talk. There were, questions being asked, like, what from the canon can you touch or not touch. And basically what you were hearing from people writing on New Trek was that it was sort of, you know finding ways to slot in member berries that don't totally that quote unquote don't totally disrupt the canon, and you find ways to kind of manipulate canon, things like that. So, we don't really technically meet the Gorn until Kirk meets that Gorn on that planet. And I can't remember the Gorn episode name, but they have that confrontation. But the problem is that with Strange New Worlds, they turn the Gorn into this weird monster race that are basically alien. They hibernate inside your stomach. They burst out of you. It was just Predator meets Alien. They combined the two and went with it, and it was stupid. And it was stupid because we've already seen the Gorn. And what made the Gorn so fascinating in the original series was the fact that they weren't monsters. The people who were kind of in the wrong were Starfleet. The Gorn eventually says, "Hey, when they're at the arena, it's called the arena, the episode. Um, when the Gorn and Kirk, have the confrontation, they begin to finally begin to communicate. Kirk realizes that they were invading their space, and that they were perceived as the bad guys. And so the big twist of it all is that the big bug-eyed monster isn't a bad guy. The Federation are the ones who are the questionable ones in this scenario. And that's fascinating. But then when you get to Strange New Worlds and they bring the Gorn back in, and there's this savage, brutal race that like eats people and hibernates inside people and bursts out and is basically like the Predator. It's just sort of like, well, like, come on. That's the most interesting thing you can do. You just rip off Alien, you rip off Predator, and you and also kind of jeopardize canon. Why do that? Again, Strange New Worlds, they bring in characters like Uhura. Why was Uhura on the Enterprise? 10 years? 12? What, 8 years or so before Kirk is meant to be there? Like, does she really need to be there? No, I don't think she does. Does Chapel need to be there? No, I don't think she does. If you were going to do Strange New Worlds with Pike, what you should have done, if you're really going to do it, is you go back to the pilot that never took off. It's also important to remember that the pilot had Pike, and the pilot was canceled. The pilot was no. The CBS were like, this doesn't work. This isn't fun. Do it again. So you're already doing a show based around Star Trek's kind of initial failure. So it's complicated, I think. So anyway, if you're going to do that, you need to make this show great, and it needs to stand on its own. And it needs to stand on its own without any sort of member berries. Yes, that would have to have Spock, because Spock was in that show. He worked with Pike, so it makes sense to have him there. Fine. But everyone else who is connected to TOS shouldn't be there. Chapel, Uhura, I can't remember who else was there. But they toy around a lot with who is on the ship at this point. And as a result, you're just sort of watching this pre-Kirk show, this pre-Kirk Enterprise, where the characters don't really act like themselves. Pike is decent. I mean, we only had one episode with Pike, so it's kind of hard to say what is Pike's personality. There wasn't a lot of that. Same with number one. But we get Spock. We get Uhura. We know what these characters. We get Chapel. And in all fairness, yes, Chapel in the original series was boring. She didn't have a character. She was very, very one-dimensional. right? So I understand wanting to bring her in and amp her up, but the problem that I have across Discovery and with Strange New Worlds was the fact that everyone sort of acts like they act like children. It's sort of like trying to merge Star Trek with New Girl, and that's a combination that I don't like. I don't like the zany, whippy, snappy dialogue. I don't like this sort of. It goes, of course, if you remember, like Starfleet is a quasi military outfit. There are chain of there's a chain of command. There's things that you need to sort of be aware of. Certain characters wouldn't speak in a certain way to superior officers, and all of that is just kind of out of just out the window, right? You have people that are making jokes or dropping the f bomb and things like that, and Star Trek was never didn't it never needed to be about that. It never needed to be about zany dialogue or dropping curse words because that's meant to be cool and fun. It never needed to do that. One, because it's primarily for it's a kid show. I grew up with it as a kid, but the problem with modern Strike is, I don't think kids could watch it. Not because of the violence, but because the language. If they're dropping the F bomb in Star Trek, well, this 8-year-old kid who could easily watch all of the original Trek can now not watch this because there is the chance that they'll pick that word up that you might not want them to pick up, and they're gonna go to school and they're gonna be, hey, fudge you, and then the teacher, where'd you hear that? Well, I heard on Star Trek. It's like that's not what Star Trek's meant to do. It's not meant to encourage cussing. Which was Gene Roddenberry, for all of his quirks, put in a lot of interesting constraints that his writers had to work around. One of those being like, no conflict at first between the characters when he was doing TNG. That's hard. You've got this cast of people and they can't have conflict. So how are you going to bring conflict into the situation? That's tough. That's tough. And as a result, the writers had to be smart. The other thing is that TOS, TNG onwards had good sci-fi writers, and the newer stuff I don't feel has that level of quality. Right? I think it's sort of pop pop sci-fi science that they just sort of in a Gilmore Girls style just sort of ramble off some nonsense, and people think that's what Star Trek's about and they just go with it. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of moments in the original show or all the kind of original run between 1966 and 2005, where there's plenty of moments where characters are babbling off some sci-fi techno babble, but they generally keep it short and sweet, right? They don't have these big dramatic moments based around that. The big dramatic moments are the resolution to the conflict, right? It's how are they going to get out of this, not from a technobabble perspective, but from a communication perspective. And that's what I always loved about original Star Trek was the communication stuff, right? I love the fact that you know Picard was known for his epic speeches. He was known to be a great moderator and bring people together through dialogue. I love all of those. I mean, I love all the scenes, not all the scenes, but I love a huge portion of the scenes of the Next Generation in which they're all just sitting there in the conference room discussing things, and everyone has their different points of view, the different perspectives, and they're trying to work out the best way forward. Right? How are they going to save this? How are they going to interfere with this? Well, this does this or doesn't this contradict the Prime Directive? All that kind of stuff. That's where the good drama was, because really, there Star Trek has always been a morality play. It's about here's a conflict, you need to resolve it, and whether it's down to TV budget and low budget for special effects. As a result, it meant that Star Trek had always had to be intelligent science fiction. It couldn't on things like Star Wars, it couldn't rely on big epic battles and fight scenes. It had to rely on low key conversation resolution for the conflict resolution through conversation, with a little bit of action sprinkled in. Um, Now I have to say, I'm totally cool with action in Star Trek. I mean, there's a lot of great action in the TOS films. Um, there's a lot of really good action in Strange New Worlds and Discovery, and action definitely holds a place in Star Trek and in history. Like there's plenty of moments that in TOS or Deep Space Nine, if they had the budget and the capability of doing the sort of action scenes that we can do today, they absolutely would have done them back then. Totally. And that was something that they talked about in that Screenwriters Guild conversation. They were like, yeah, no, we absolutely would have loved to have done this stuff, but we didn't have the budget to do it. They had to write around those constraints, which again makes it you have to think through things differently. You can't just run with the big bad action scenes because, well, I can't afford that. Which I think in the original run of Star Trek, that probably helped it out and made it more about the characters rather than the action. Um, and so I've always really liked that about the original stuff, and it's what I think holds back a lot of new Trek. A lot of new Trek is action first and character second, which was another interesting point in that conversation on the Screenwriters Guild. It's on the YouTube. You can find it. It's there. Um, when listening to the writers from Deep Space Nine and TNG, they were saying, character always had to come first, and action always came second. And I think a lot of new Trek has, like I said, has lost that. It is all about, well, we have the budget, we have the effects, let's have a big battle scene, and then we'll worry about the character stuff later. And as a result, you have kind of uneven, uninteresting characters. There's a few that are fun. So those are always my issues with discovering Strange New Worlds. But now let's get into Picard, right? When Patrick Stewart came out on stage, however many years ago, and it was like, Jean-Luc Picard is back. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I'm cool with this. I'm ready to revisit Picard. I'm ready to revisit the next gen crew. I never felt that Nemesis was a good ending for the TNG crew ever. I thought it was sort of Nemesis wasn't really a good movie. Tom Hardy as clone Picard. It was all just a bit lame. Nemesis is by far not my favorite. Picard with his little Humvee, racing through the desert. Yeah, I totally agree with, like, I think it was Red Letter Media who were like, the Picard in the movies is not Picard from the TV show, and I do agree with that. Kirk, William Shatner transitioned well from TOS into the films, because Kirk was always a bit of an action guy even in the show. So to see him do action in the movies, it made sense. Picard, who was, like I said, the king of conflict resolution through conversation, was not Mr. Action Man. So when he is morphed into Action Man in some of the TNG movies, it's sort of, you don't really feel like it's fully Picard. It's action, it's movie version, which was quite funny, But anyway, the announcement comes that Picard's coming back. I'm like, that's cool. I'm interested. I want to see the TNG crew. And one of the main things that interested me was like, okay, finally we're moving forward. We're finally getting to a point where we're going to see life in the Star Trek universe beyond the final events of Nemesis, right? Voyager's come to an end. By that point, I think Voyager's come to an end by that point. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it has. We're moving on into the future. But the future that we moved into was a very complicated one. It was one thing that I didn't like straight away, and I guess I didn't really like this in Star Trek, the 2009 film, was I never really liked the idea that Romulus blew up, and that, the whole I mean, the problem with Star Trek 2009 is that if Nero had any sense, going back in time wouldn't have been about killing Spock. It would have been about warning Romulus that, hey, in 100 and however many years, the sun's gonna blow up, and then saving Romulus. Like, I don't. It just didn't make any sense that his big thing was, I'm gonna go back in time and kill Spock because he didn't save my planet. And then blowing up Vulcan, and that was just nonsense. So I understand why they kept the Romulus thing canon in Picard. It's just something I would have loved if they ignored. I don't think it added anything, mainly because it hasn't really been explored in an interesting way. So anyway, my excitement very quickly waned with Picard season one. I tried to watch it, and I eventually got through it all, but I couldn't watch Picard in one go. It took a long time for me to get through that series. I didn't. I felt like Picard wasn't acting like Picard. I know I was complaining about the film version not acting like Picard, but film version, there were traces of TV Picard, but Star Trek Picard didn't have any traces of action Picard from the films or thoughtful Picard from the TV show from TNG. He was just this old wistful man who had weird dreams about Data, and Data dying, and you could tell that the thought process behind this show was that the only thing, people remember from Next Generation in terms of pop culture and the zeitgeist is, oh yeah, nope, yep, I remember Data and Riker and Picard. And the thing is, Picard and Data were never best friends. Geordi and Data were best friends. Picard didn't really care about Data in the beginning. Grew to like him over time, but they were never best friends. They were never Kirk and Spock. But they sort of appear that way to people who don't know Trek, who don't know TNG, right? The general public who see the poster think, oh, well, that must be the Kirk and Spock dynamic, but it's not. So yeah, Picard season one did not win me over. I thought the whole Data's daughter nonsense, the bringing back the Borg, killing Achebe, it just didn't feel right. Everything felt murky and hateful. And Star Trek isn't meant to feel hateful, right? The Federation, Starfleet, is meant to feel hopeful. Now, there's lots of discussion about, is Earth a utopia? Earth is not a utopia in Star Trek. It's resolved a lot of its conflict. It's resolved a lot of problems, which is good, and that makes it quite fun. It's like, disease, famine, war, that stuff has been eradicated from human civilization. That is wonderful, but there is still conflict. There are still bad people on Earth. There's plenty of bad admirals, and you see bad people all throughout TOS and TNG, and plenty in Deep Space Nine. So, there's plenty of bad people in Starfleet and in the Federation. So I never had a problem with that, but I think Deep Space Nine handled it the best when they were trying to show, when they really held the kind of the morals of the Federation they held them to the fire to see how well they stood up. And you saw a lot of characters that you loved do questionable things. I mean, there's that wonderful episode, the pale under the pale moonlight, where Cisco's like chatting, doing his whole log, and it's all about him creating that basically fake news, fake information to give to the Romulans. Cisco is a very moral guy, and he does something very amoral, and it's or immoral, and you begin to understand these conflicts. Or there's the episode later on with Bashir and the admiral, and I think it's all connected to Section 31 stuff, and Bashir's like, what have we become? And that stuff is interesting. That stuff is fun. But on a whole, Starfleet is a hopeful organization. And that's what I loved about it. But then you get to Picard, and like every single aspect of the Federation is evil. You have that admiral lady who's cussing at him, and you have all this nonsense going on with the Borg, and again with Picard season 1, it was more member berries, more you remember this, this, da 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 da, and we weren't really getting any progression. It was, you remember Data died, you remember the Borg, and it just became uninteresting for me, and I couldn't finish. It was a struggle to finish, like when it was coming out, and like I said, I eventually got there, but it just didn't feel right. Even the character, like bringing back Seven of Nine to be like someone who hangs out with Picard, I thought was brilliant. I love that idea of Seven and Picard going on adventures. I thought the character of Rios was a cool guy who was completely underused and underdeveloped. I never really took interest in Raffi. I don't know what it is. She hasn't really gelled with me. But in terms of characterization, Picard never felt like himself, and Seven never felt like herself. She was this angry, bitter, disillusioned individual, that is off being a ranger and left Starfleet and all this kind of stuff. And again, like when I think about the character of Raffi, even though she's not a legacy character, her whole living out by the rocks where they filmed the arena in TOS, where she's in her little shack, and she's angry about life, and I don't know, she's an alcoholic and talking about how she's poor. I'm like, wait a minute, like we've literally eradicated that from human society, so it doesn't really make sense that you're poor and you live in this, basically a trailer in the middle of the desert. Like that sort of squalor doesn't or shouldn't exist. And so you found these weird contradictions. It's like, I'm fine with someone being maybe evil and betraying, all that kind of stuff, but it's like these are like really basic things that Star Trek was very clear about in the future have been totally taken care of. And I think that sort of twisted Starfleet goes into hyperdrive, but when you get the Discovery, when they jump 1,000 years into the future, and then you find like Earth is this isolationist planet, and it's just like, well, that's just there's a habit in modern writing, to modern TV show writing, to make legacy characters or things be deconstructed. So what was once sort of aspirational heroism is replaced with deconstructed stuff. Everything's deconstructed to the point where it's unrecognizable. Everything is hopeless and broken. You saw it with Man of Steel. You saw it with The Last Jedi. We've seen it over and over with new modern Trek. And it's kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of sick of that. I want to see my heroes be heroes. I want to be able to hold on to hope of a better future. And that's what Star Trek did, despite there being bad people. On a whole, you're like, yeah, this is hopeful. I'm hopeful. It's a future that you want that you hope comes into existence. So like I said, Picard season 1 didn't land for me, and then you get to Picard season 2, and that was shockingly bad. The whole time travel element, this is meeting Guinan in the past. Well, meeting Guinan in the 21st century when Picard already met Guinan in the 1800s with the Mark Twain episode. It was like, well, and she doesn't remember Picard, but there was such a big deal about her having remembered Picard. It was there was a lot of canon altering moments in Picard season 2. The whole idea of what they did with the Borg and Girardi becoming the Borg Queen and having been the Borg Queen this whole time. It's like, well, if she's been the Borg Queen this whole time, why did the Borg attempt to, assimilate Picard and make him look Locutus, and everything that happened during Voyager? If she's been this good Borg Queen for all this time, why was she not doing more to, if you've had what 300 years of being the Borg Queen, surely you would have changed the whole history of the Borg by now, but you don't. And so it didn't make sense. There was a lot of stuff in Picard that just really didn't make sense. And frankly, what was it? I think it was episode 2 or 3 into Picard season 2, and they dropped the trailer for season 3. And I'm not surprised by that. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any inside information. It just felt funny to me that after a couple of episodes into Picard season 2, people really weren't loving it as much as probably CBS wanted. And I suspect, I don't know, I suspect numbers might have been dropping on the viewership. I have no idea. But to drop a trailer like they did that said, hey, season 3, it's the Next Generation reunion that you've always wanted. Get ready. That to me was saying, hey, come on, keep watching this season. Keep coming with us, because everything that you've been waiting for is about to happen. And the thing that was just the thing that was so funny is by the end of season 2 of Picard, everything that had been done and set up is completely erased. And it's hilarious. It's interesting to me. I would love to sit and get and speak with someone who works on the show and could explain, well, what was the thought process? Why did we, you have Elnor, who's space Legolas with a ninja space Legolas. You have Rios, all that kind of. Why did we completely erase all these people? Why did we get rid of them? What was the point of that? Because this is your main cast. You got rid of the girl who was Data's daughter, blah 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 blah. All these people just suddenly gone. All the players are off the table except for Picard and Seven and Raffi. But a huge portion of your main cast is gone, and is said, hey, none of these people are coming back for season 3. We're bringing back the old guns. Riker, Beverly, Worf, Geordi, all those people are coming back. And it's like, oh, fascinating. What it told me, what it felt like to me, because I can only go on feelings, because like I said, I have no inside information. I'm just a Trek fan rambling about my love of Star Trek, but I need a drink. So then you get to Picard 3. Let's put the thing in. Picard 3 brings back everybody. Not everyone, obviously. There's no Data. Data's still dead, as far as we know. And the first trailer that came out for Picard season 3 legitimately won me over, because it was the first time that I watched a trailer for Star Trek since 2005 where I felt like I was actually seeing Star Trek, right? The hints of the Titan A looked great. It was like, oh my god, we're actually seeing a starship. We're seeing one that looks like a Constitution class ship. I was like, that was nice. Loved seeing that. we're seeing Riker come back. We're seeing Riker and Picard do some stuff. And I was like, I love that. I love finally being able to see these two guys back together off an adventure. I love the idea of finally catching up with all of these people who I've been wanting to catch up with since season 1 of Picard and see where their stories have gone. You know, see what is similar to uh, uh, the end of the best of not the best of both worlds. Um, all good things, part 1 and 2, where we see a sort of possible future. You know, where Beverly is captain of a ship, Geordi is working at Starfleet Command. He's got 2 daughters. Da 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 da. You know, I wanted to see that sort of world, and I think Red Letter Media did a really fun speculative show about a hypothetical Star Trek show called, I think they called it Star Trek Galaxy, and I was like, that was a show I would love to see, and if I could, I would love to I would love to know how much influence that Red Letter Media video had on Star Trek 3 of Picard. Because honestly, I feel like there's moments where I'm like, this feels like that hypothetical Star Trek Galaxy show that Red Letter Media spoke about in that review of a show that was never a show. So anyway, I was hyped. The initial trailers, all that kind of stuff, were winning me over. And one of the other things that won me over early on was one particular individual who was very, very vocal on social media and on YouTube about having seen all 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard and vouched for it. And this is an individual who has been an adamant, you know, disliker of everything Star Trek since the new stuff started. So hearing that particular person's opinion that, hey, this is actually really good, and I did ask them on Twitter ages ago, you know, does season 3 more or less ignore everything that came in seasons 1 and 2? And he was like, yes. And I was like, okay, that tells me a lot. If we're mostly ignoring everything that's come beforehand, then this is, you know, it's not a reboot, but it's close. It's, you know, yes, there's 2 seasons. They sort of still exist in this 3rd season. The events, I guess, have happened. But do you need to watch seasons 1 and 2 to watch season 3 of Picard? And the answer is no, not at all. And that brought me a lot of joy. Because the more it could distance itself from those 2 seasons that I just thought were really not very good. And when I say not very good, I mean in a sense that, you know, there were a lot of people who clearly worked hard on those shows. They look great. Any of the new Star Trek shows, I cannot fault the way they look. They look amazing. The special effects are incredible. There's a lot of hard work that goes into them. That's I can't deny that. There's actors who are acting, they act well. But there's just these things that don't feel Trekky, and that comes down to both, I think, a bit of writing, problems with showrunners who maybe don't care, maybe, I don't know, and directors who maybe don't quite understand either. But then you get to 3. And one of the big things is that one of the guy running Star Trek Picard Series 3, they've had a different showrunner every season, which also doesn't help. But Series 3 was run by is run by Terry Matalas, who has worked on Star Trek since ages ago. Worked on, I think, definitely worked on it with Enterprise, might have done work on Voyager, I can't remember, but he's been, you know, in the Star Trek world for a very long time, and is part of that Rick Berman era. Who Rick Berman was the guy who basically took over from Gene Roddenberry after Gene died, and was very. he was very adamant to kind of keep Gene's vision alive throughout the rest of the shows. Um, and I think Star Trek needed that sort of guide to say this is the confines that we can work in. Here's where we're sort of breaking it. Here's where we can't. That kind of stuff. And so I think there was something really wonderful about bringing someone in to run a Star Trek show who had that experience, who could pull from their time working on those shows from that period, and who also I think and feel like has a real genuine love for this cast, for these characters, and wanted to give them a send off that was, something similar to Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. Something that the Next Generation crew never had. I mean, I think Star Trek 6 is a wonderful film, and is a wonderful send off for Kirk and Spock and McCoy and Uhura and all those. And the final scene of that movie lives rent free in my brain, where they're sailing into the sunset and Kirk's like, this is the final voyage. We're gonna go be decommissioned, and they're like, who's like, Starfleet wants us to come back, and blah blah blah, and Spock's like, if I were human, I would say to hell with our orders, and then Kirk's like, all right, where to, Captain? And Kirk's like, second star to the right and straight on till morning, and then they sail into the sun. It is a beautiful ending to the next gen, or to the TOS crew. Absolutely beautiful. Loved it. We didn't Nemesis was not that. We didn't get that with Nemesis at all. We got sort of Data's dead. Riker goes to go on to captain the Titan. Picard remains on the Enterprise, and there's B4 is kind of hints that like Data's memories are going to come back inside him. There's but you really feel like, okay, we're going to get something more from the next gen. There's one more movie coming, one more, and then we'll wrap everything up. Never happened, and so you're kind of like, that's a bit disappointing. So I never felt like that again. So I love the fact that was one of the big things that the new showrunner Terry wanted to do with this, is give this crew a send off. And I think we're 2 episodes in, and I think we are getting there. I think we are getting that. And there's something so different, not so different, but different enough from seasons 1 and 2 and Strange New Worlds and Discovery. Watching the first episode of Picard season 3 it really, I know a lot of people have been saying it online, but it is some of the best Star Trek we've seen in a long time. It really feels like we're back in the Star Trek universe, where earlier seasons didn't feel like that. They felt like this sort of weird alternate reality, right? Sorry, had to take another drink because I was thirsty. So yeah, so the first two seasons, like this season 3 feels like it's like, we're back, we're finally back, we're seeing, in a good way, we're seeing things, we're seeing the big beautiful space dock that floats above Earth, that we've seen multiple times in the TOS films, and a few times in the Next Generation. We're seeing all that stuff, and it's like, oh right, this is the familiar Star Trek that I love, that I want to see, the beautiful ships, the beautiful space dock, going and exploring. So Picard season 3 begins with a wonderful homage to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan begins with the line, "in the 23rd century." So I love the fact. There's a couple of things I love. The minute the show starts, there's a couple of things. One, it starts within the 25th century. So it's that familiar sense of like, okay, Wrath of Khan was in a way a soft reboot after the motion picture didn't do as well as it was meant to. And this feels like, okay, seasons 1 and 2 didn't do as well, so we're gonna kind of, this is our Wrath of Khan for the next gen crew. And I'm excited about that. So you have this sort of thing that's familiar. And I'm like, I'm in. I like this. The other thing that they've done that I love is they've ditched that really long intro that lists the 40 producers who work on the who work on this show, and they've just done a quick title card that just says Star Trek Picard. It plays a little bit of the TNG theme, and then caps it off with the little bit of the Picard theme, and then goes into a star field, and it says part one. So each episode is part one, part two, part three, blah, blah, blah. But it goes in that star field that we've come to know and love from the opening of TNG and TOS. And it's like, this is great. Uses the same kind of text and color scheme of TNG. So it's like, okay, yeah, this is stuff I like. This is stuff I remember. But it's not doing it in a ham-fisted member-berry way. It's like, no, I like this because this actually feels like Star Trek. This actually feels like we're getting back into this world, and it's not, it's not this kind of hate-filled, I don't know, weird Star Trek world where everyone is wanting to cuss and kill me. So yeah, so I absolutely, let me change that. I absolutely loved this this opening. I think it was great. So the basic premise is that what starts off is we first come to Beverly, and she's on her ship. She's out in the middle of space, and some dudes or some aliens are attacking her ship, and she sends a distress call to Picard. She's like, "I need you to come help me. No Starfleet. Don't trust anyone. There's something big going down. I'm da 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 da." That Picard picks up that message, and he instantly turns to Riker for help. And he's like, "Look, Beverly sent me this message. I haven't spoken to her in 20 years." And I was like, "That's interesting." I was hooked on that. I was like, "Okay, Beverly's been out of the picture for 20 years. Picard seems to have, he still has connections with the other crew, but Beverly is the one who's been MIA, and no one has talked to her for 20 years." So I was like, I'm interested to see where that goes. But Picard is like, "Look, she needs our help. She wouldn't call if this wasn't serious." And essentially Picard and Riker they devise a way to commandeer a ship to go to the coordinates where Beverly says that she is, so that they can help her, because they also know that she's not only worried about some threat, but she's also wounded. And it's fun because you get this sort of, the homages are a dime a dozen in this show. Sorry, my chat just like jumped, and there's a whole bunch of comments here that actually weren't there a second ago. So I don't know what's happening with StreamYard, guys. So if you've been talking to me for the last 30 minutes, I actually haven't I haven't actually seen it. So it's let me jump to some of these comments in the chat then. Biffer, you mentioned something about Vulcan blows up. Vulcan blows up, not Romulus. Biffer, no, in the 2009 film, Romulus is destroyed by like a supernova. And Spock couldn't help it, and then Vulcan, then Nero blows up Vulcan in the new timeline. Yeah, they blew up. Yeah, okay, yeah. The other comment is, what do you think about the newer Star Trek movies and TV shows? This is from Long Haul. Hello, Long Haul. I apologize for getting to this now. I like I said, I wasn't getting any of the comments weren't turning up. I guess I've been talking quite a lot about the newer Trek movies and TV shows. To recap briefly, what I think of the newer movies, I think they all sort of suck. And it's disappointing. The first one I think is kind of fun. as a gateway drug, as I said. But Into Darkness is terrible. Star Trek Beyond just feels has some good moments, but feels ultimately tired, because every single new Trek film is about a guy who wants revenge on Starfleet for some reason, and I just find that there's some sort of big fiasco. Khan wants to blow up a planet. Nero blows up planets. Um, the guy Idris Elba's character from Beyond wants to destroy a big space station. It's all just sort of the same stuff. These kind of boring revenge plots that, because they're literally all identical, it feels like I've watched the same film 3 times in a row, and that is frankly kind of annoying. So therefore, I don't really like the new films. I'd never have a desire to go and watch them, really ever, and it's a shame because I do have to caveat all that by saying that the cast for the new Star Trek films are really good. I think Chris Pine does a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job of basically imitating Shatner's Kirk, and I like that a lot. Um, Spock he's a little bit too emotional. I think Leonard Nimoy was so perfect as Spock. No one's been able to really get him. Um, Anyone who's tried to play Spock doesn't really understand how to play Vulcans fully, in my opinion. Um, the guy who plays Tuvok is perfect. He's a perfect Vulcan, because he understands the emotionlessness of Vulcans, whereas Spock in these movies is kind of always he's always angry. He's always ready to like beat people up and scream and yell and cry. And I'm like, stop it! Like, those moments in TOS when Spock finally elicits a flash of emotion are big deals, and or like, when you get to Star Trek for the voyage home, when Spock is in this weird sense of trying to regain who he is. I mean, there's plenty of wonderful comedy in Star Trek 4, playing with Spock trying to, come back to who he is and who he was. So yeah, that's my very brief talk on that. And yes, Biffer, the man I was speaking about was Meyer Burnett, who talked about, who vouched for Star Trek Picard Series 3. And then Biffer, the last comment you said was a few minutes ago was talking to your ex sucks. I agree. I don't know what that's in reference to. Oh no, I do. You're talking about Picard and Beverly, right? Yes. I'm assuming that's what you mean. Yes, talking to your ex does suck. Um, I gotta be honest. One of the other things that was rather sad, but kind of also telling, was that there's the character of Laris, who was Picard's housekeeper, Romulan housekeeper, who in the first season has a husband. Second season, he's dead. By the end of the second season, they're kind of in a relationship. By the beginning of the first season of season 3, or the first episode of season 3, they're meant to go off to some other planet together. And because of this distress call from Beverly, she's like, okay, you're gonna go help your ex. I guess I'm just gonna go on my own. Maybe see you later. And that was funny. It's also sad because Laris was never a character that I think was very well developed. But again, it's another moment where they've written out entirely another individual who was, really big in, well, not really big, but had a large presence in the first 2 seasons, and now she's gone. To shame. Wonderful. I mean, great actress. I think she's very good. A very good actress. But yeah. So anyway, Picard. Back to Picard, the first episode of season 3. And keep your comments in the chat. I've opened it up, so hopefully I will see more that come through, as opposed to just getting a 30 minutes worth of comments and not seeing them. So I was just rambling on, thinking no one was talking to me, but you were. Ba, 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 da, ba, ba, ba. Maybe I will just briefly put. I'll just tell people. I'll just tell people that what's going on. Um. So yeah. So I think Biffer, you mentioned in the chat that you've only seen the first episode. So are you saying that you're not going to watch any more of season three? Let me know because I legit want to know. I my encouragement is to anyone who has had difficulties with Star Trek in the past, with the kind of the newer stuff. Who say whatever they want to say. It's not Trek, it's not real Trek, da 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 da. Which you're entitled to that opinion, and I think some of that might be accurate. I really want to encourage you to stick with Picard season three. I really think you should. Um, the first two episodes are pretty they're pretty damn fun. I'm not gonna lie. Um, but yes, give me a second. Um, I'm just putting it out there that I'm doing this. Obviously, I've been talking for an hour and and stuff. But yeah, you never know. You never know. Some people out there who might not know might want to come in and hang out. Um, Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, so back to Picard. Back to Picard season three. Yeah. So there's this interesting setup, and Beverly has a problem. Picard and Riker are like, hey, we got to come into your ship. It very much riffs on Star Trek three, where Kirk and and company are like, look, Spock is still alive. His conscious is inside McCoy. He's turned McCoy into a freak, and I loved it. And so this is really riffing on that. Like, we got to get a ship. We got to get to her. We got to get to Beverly. She's like, don't trust Starfleet. And Riker's like, I think I got a workaround. And so the two guys, they decide to not commandeer. Uh, per se, but they want to manipulate a situation in which they're going to go on board the Titan A, and convince the new captain Liam Shaw to do a test run of the Titan before there's a big holiday coming up called Frontier Day, where it's kind of honoring 250 years of Starfleet space exploration. Which again I think is a wonderful. It's a nice little reference to the history of Star Trek. This Frontier Day being a thing that's kind of lingering in the background and something we're going to come to. So anyway, these two guys go into space dock, and we get our first real look of the Titan. And my goodness, my goodness, I so yeah, this yeah, they kind of imitate the Search for Spock stuff, but we get our first look at the Titan, and I love this ship. Honestly, this is the first ship in sort of in New Trek that I have just fallen in love with almost immediately. I am a huge fan of the Constellation class, the Constitution class. On Constellation, what the fuck am I talking about? Constitution class. The Enterprise refit and the Enterprise A are two of my favorite ships, two of my favorite versions of the Enterprise. I mean, the refit and the A are more or less identical. But I gosh darn love it. I absolutely loved it. And seeing that they've refit the Titan to imitate this style, this Neo Constitution class, as Riker called it, made me very, very happy. Yes, Biffer, you mentioned in the chat that the dark and dreary Trek is very hard to follow. I prefer bright and hope. Yeah, I totally agree. And again, it's like I was saying, there's plenty of dark and dreary stories. I mean, half of Deep Space Nine is a dark story, but there's that hopeful undertone. You never think you while there's darkness going on, like the characters are still hopeful. Cisco is still hopeful. Cisco, Bashir, Kira, Dax, all they still hold to their morals, and they're fighting to maintain the hope that is brought with the Federation, and that's what I love, and that is what was missing with Picard season 1 and 2. I mean, the Federation were bad guys. They were being mean to the Romulans. It all just didn't make sense. It's like, no, that's not, Starfleet wouldn't do that. And so that, yeah, I totally agree with you on that point. Anyway, the Titan A, my God, what a gosh darn beautiful ship. It was lovely to see that they brought not only bring back space dock that looks wonderful, they brought back this style of a ship that is so it's such an iconic ship in Star Trek history. Like that, it just I mean, look at that. Look at that. If you're listening on Spotify, it's because I got a picture of the Titan up right now, and it's such a beautiful ship. Like I behind me I have the little Eagle Moss models of all of the Enterprises. Oh, they're there behind the kind of the characters, and I wish I could get an Eagle Moss version of this ship. I really do. God, it was great. Um, so yeah, so then and like I said, this is the original Enterprise A, I guess. So I love this style. It's an iconic Star Trek ship. And I love the fact that this season brings us back to space adventure on a ship. And what I absolutely love is that Riker and Picard go on board. They kind of said, "Oh, yeah, let's test run the Titan." And there's this wonderful leaving of space dock. That's very reminiscent of Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 6, and the music is capturing that Star Trek feel. They're repurposing and reusing a lot of old themes from Star Trek. So it's like I always feel the music is a big character in Star Trek. It's as important as Spock and Kirk and Picard. Like it is an integral part to the feel of the show or the films. And just it hearing that music as it leaves space, as the Titan A leaves space dock is wonderful because it gives you a sense of, hey, we are going on an adventure. We're about to have an adventure in space, and I'm like, that's what I want. Star Trek for me never needed to be about fully about exploring strange new worlds or thing. That's part of it. That's fun. That's fun. But the Star Trek movies didn't really do that. Star Trek 1, 2, 3, 4 are wildly different. I mean, Star Trek 4 is a time travel comedy. Star Trek 3 is about it's not an official mission. They steal a ship to go help their friend get in a scuffle with the Klingons, and Kirk loses his son. It's a wonderful personal story. Personal story for the crew, personal story for Kirk for various reasons, and I love that. So that's why I love Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine, I didn't need to be jumping from new planet to new planet every day. I'm more than happy to just see what happens with these characters, grow with these characters, and I feel like that's this first episode was like, hey, we got Kirk, we got Picard, we got Riker, we got this brand new ship. We have Seven, who's the commander of it, which I liked. I liked seeing Seven come back, and I liked seeing Seven in Seven of Nine in a uniform, being a commander of a ship. She should have always been that. I think she should have always been that. Seeing her as this kind of a hate-filled ranger in season one and two was just I didn't need that. I didn't need that version of Seven. It just didn't feel like an interesting progression of that character. So back to chat real quick. Biffer asks, most iconic ship in pop culture history: Star Trek Enterprise or TARDIS? I'm gonna say the Enterprise. I mean, Doctor Who is big, is very big, but I think the Enterprise. I could be wrong. That is, I am one man with one opinion. Well, I got many opinions, but on that, I would say the Enterprise. Biff, you also I used to hate Star Trek 4, but I rewatched it recently, and Star Trek 4 is a brilliant movie. The Voyage Home is a wonderful movie. That it shows you the dexterity of Star Trek. It can be this submarine drama that is Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, or it can be this witty time travel story. I mean, one of my favorite lines from Star Trek 4 is when Kirk is trying to convince the I can't remember the lady's name, but the lady who is in charge of the whales. And Spock is being awkward and weird because he's trying to regain who he is. And Kirk leans in, he's like, "He's a little too much LDS." And she's like, "Don't you mean LSD?" It's just these wonderful moments. It lent itself so wonderful to Shatner's sense of humor, and Spock's, Leonard Nimoy's as well. Just the whole thing was great. Whole thing was great. So go watch Star Trek 4. It's wonderful. So yeah, so it was terrific seeing this Constitution class ship, Titan A, beautiful ship. I mean, look at that. Look at that ship. Gosh dang, like it's this moment where the Titan is about to go off, blast into warp drive was just terrific. Honestly, absolutely terrific. I loved it. Um, let's see here. Um, so there's some interesting things that happen in this episode. Really, really interesting things. What should I talk about? We talked about Seven. That's cool. Oh yeah, I want to talk about uniforms real quick. This is more aesthetic stuff. I like the new uniforms. I can't remember if these were the same from Star Trek season in Picard season 2 or 1, but I don't think they're the same as 1. But this uniform is a wonderful blend of the kind of the Deep Space Nine, red, gold, blue shoulder, shoulder stuff with the kind of the kind of weird, I don't know, whatever you call the red uniforms in the Wrath of Khan, all that kind of stuff. I like that they've kind of blended those two together. I think that's a really, really fun look for these. So I'm loving that. I'm loving that. Um, I I think I'm fair with my reviews. The only thing that I that I didn't quite like so far, as I'm watching episode 1, is I do wish the sets of the bridge and the general and the ships, I wish the interior was just a little bit lighter. Um, I can see that they have created incredible looking sets. That bridge of the Titan looks amazing, but it is a bummer that I can't see it because it's so dark. And I have to caveat that with also saying that was one of my disappointments with the motion picture and with Wrath of Khan. The bridge was so dark. It was like, why is the bridge so dark? It was nice and bright in TOS. Like I don't need the neon colors and kind of stuff. Like that's fine to get rid of that, but I liked it being bright. And again, it's one of the things I loved about one of the few things I like about Star Trek 5 and Star Trek 6 is the Enterprise. The bridge is well lit. You can see people and things in it. And I I just wish that they had adjusted that a little bit with this season. That's in terms of the aesthetics. That's one of the only things that I'm like, I would have liked that. I didn't mind Crusher's because she's on her own ship. I didn't mind Crusher's ship being, dark because it's been damaged. There's a big battle going on. Da 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 da. So I'm fine with that being dark and scary. I just sort of wish that in the interior of the Titan was a little bit brighter. Um, there's a new character in Star Trek Picard. There's a new guy in town. His name is Liam Shaw. I don't know about you guys, but I really really liked Shaw. Um, what was so fun about the initial scene where Liam is listening to Picard and Riker say, "Oh, we want to take the ship. Oh, well, let's change course and do this and da 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 da." And he's like, "Ha ha ha, no." And they're like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Look, I've been running the Titan for 5 years. I have a well-oiled ship, and you want to come in and do all this cowboy nonsense." And he's like, "That's not happening on my ship. Picard, you're a retired admiral, so kind of don't have to listen to you. Uh, Riker, you don't have a command, so again, we're the same command. I don't have to listen to you." And he's just like, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it." And Shaw also has some. He says a really cold line when the kind of to Seven and Picard about her helping former Borg, and it was a pretty. I was like, gosh dang, Shaw, that was a mean thing to say. But the thing is, what's so interesting about Shaw? It's like, you know what? I saw that and I was like, this is that wonderful moment where you were introduced to a new captain. And sometimes Star Trek brings in captains who appear to be jackasses and appear that they might be evil, but actually they're being quite sensible. And on one end, I totally understand why Shaw was like, no, not doing this, guys. This is my ship. I'm not playing these games. I got a real sense of like a Jellicoe vibe. So Captain Jellicoe was a guy who took over the Enterprise for one episode, and there was this constant tension between him and the rest of the crew because they thought that he was either evil or reckless, didn't know what he was doing. Turns out he knew exactly what he was doing, and the crew just needed to shut up and listen to him. And it's a wonderful episode, and it kind of subverts that whole the evil captain or the evil admiral kind of expectation that happens every once in a while in Star Trek. Um, Now, in this scene, in this point in the show, I'm starting to kind of predict what might come up in the future, right? Might what might happen. One of those things is by this point in the episode, one when they take the Titan out, Picard is like tells Seven that she should give the order and lead her, pilot her out of space dock. And as they begin to do that, Picard's like, "Do you need to tell engineering that we're gonna go to warp 9.9?" And she's like, Picard, we don't need to do that anymore. It's all automated. It's fine." And he's like, "Oh right, oh yeah, you'll make a good captain." And it's kind of played off like he was testing her, but then Riker's like, "Yeah, good save," and he's like, "Shut up." And that was interesting. That was an interesting fumble for Picard. Because then in this scene, when we're first meeting Shaw, and Picard's like, uh, hang on, I don't know. What do you mean you didn't know that? I saw Shaw stuff in monkeys. You didn't know that. Wait, I didn't know what? Tell me what you're referring to, Biffer, because I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, Picard gets that thing wrong with Seven on the ship, and then in this moment with Shaw, he's like, "Yeah, I want to go to this different set of coordinates, and then we'll debrief at DS4." And everyone in the room is like, "What are you talking about?" And then Shaw's like, "DS4 has been decommissioned for a year now, or something like that." And then Seven chimes in, she's like, "Oh no, I think he means DS11." And Picard's like, "Yes, that's what I mean." Now, my wife who watched this episode with me, she was like, "Oh, I just took that to mean that it was just kind of he was trying to, a bit of subterfuge that failed." And I was like, "I don't think so. I have a feeling these two slip ups with Picard, they are going to bring back his they're going to bring back his he has a neurological Picard has a neurological disease." That was mentioned way back in TNG and was a point of issue in All Good Things 1 and 2. I think these slip ups are a hint of that. I think despite Picard's new body or whatever, stupid robot human body didn't really make any sense. I think that's coming. I think that might come into play. I think that might come into play. Um, uh, Oh, right, right. Sorry, I get what you're saying now, Biffer. You didn't know that was a phrase of kids. Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, it's true. So I think that I do. I think Picard's neurological disease might be coming into play with these forgetful moments. They're two very fleeting moments that could easily be explained if read in a different way, but I think that's what that's going to be. But this first introduction to Shaw, I liked. I thought, hey, this guy is a cool, interesting character, and it's I'm on board. He's winning me. He's winning me over very very early on. Um, Now there's a subplot in the first episode that's about Raffi. She's working for Starfleet's intelligence, and she's trying to find out about some plot that's going to happen and some technology that's been stolen. Blah 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 blah. I gotta be honest because I'm gonna give a fair review on this. I didn't find those bits as interesting. I was anytime these scenes came up, I was eager to get back to Picard and the Titan and see what was happening there. Um, So yeah, so kind of bored. Like I said, Raffi is not my favorite character in general with this new show or the show in general. Um, I like a lot of the historic characters who are kind of embittered, rightfully so, of lady characters like Kira. Kira Nerys is great. Um, Belana Torres is also great, but you kind of I was won over by them, and I kind of sympathized or empathized with the reasons for why they're so frustrated. Um, it's just something about Raffi. I don't get into anyway. So I didn't quite like this, but this was interesting to me. She has a handler, right? And she's trying to relay information to them. The handler won't meet her in person. She doesn't know who they are, and they will only speak via text communication. And as as I was watching this episode, that I could tell I knew who her handler would be, or I predicted who her handler would be, and I was like, her handler is going to be Worf. And there were two reasons why I thought that. One was this right here, was this line where the text says, "The stolen weapon is an act of war." If you know Worf, he is always one to sort of exaggerate. He's ready for war. He's ready for action. He's ready for violence. He's always ready for blood. I love that about Worf. He's so fun. And another line, he says, "You are a warrior," uh, which again, that's very Worf terminology. The other thing is that there are no contractions. Worf doesn't speak in contractions, and there are none in this text exchange. So that was a really big hint that I think this handler is going to be Worf. Um, so anyway, the Titan is commandeered. Seven agrees to not listen to Shaw and takes Picard and Riker to the coordinates where they need to go. And it pisses Shaw off. And Riker and Picard go to Beverly's ship, which is hidden inside of a cloud, a nebula of some kind, just outside of Federation space. They board her ship. And they find her in a medical stasis pod, and they come across this new fella, this other new fella, who we find out is Crusher's son. We also find out that they have been on the run, and that essentially what Beverly has been doing these last few years, at least, is basically doing kind of frontier medicine, where she's taking medicine and supplies to people who need it, but she's doing it kind of as a rogue. She's not doing it with any sort of Starfleet approval, and she's her and her son are basically, yeah, they've gone rogue in there, and this is essentially what they're doing. There's a really obvious moment in which Riker's like, "Wonder who his dad is," staring at Picard. And I was like, "Yeah, I wonder who this guy's dad is." Um, and then the episode, yes, then the episode has a big dramatic ending where they're like, well, who's chasing you? And the guy whose name is Jack Crusher, named after Beverly's former husband, Jack Crusher. So you're about to find out, and this big menacing ship comes out of the space cloud and comes face to face with Beverly's ship, and then then it smashes to black and begins to play the end credits. Now I have to say, the end credits. One, I love the music because they're using the music from First Contact, which the score for First Contact is a stunning score. I absolutely love that score so much. Um, if I were in charge, which I'm not, so who gives a shit what I think? But I'm going to tell you anyway. If I were in charge, the only thing that was mildly jarring about the end credits is that the music is a little bit too mellow, jumping straight in. You're kind of like, wait a minute. We just had this big dramatic scene. There's all this big dramatic music, and the music throughout the whole episode is beautiful, and the end credits music is also beautiful. But what I would have done is I would have I would have used the if you listen to the end credits, about 30 seconds in, they go into the build up and play the original TNG theme. I would have just started with that, and played that all the way through. But that's it. That's it. It's I mean, to be fair, in general, a lot of my gripes with Picard season 3 are so minor. Because honestly, watching this episode when it came to an end, I was so happy. I really was happy because I was like, God damn, Picard was acting like Picard. That moment when they're on Beverly's ship and he's setting up the dampening transportation, the teleport dampening field, was like I was like, oh my god, yes, Picard is thinking. He's going into action. He knows what to do. Him and Riker are being clever. They are anticipating their enemy's moves and they're doing what they can to to thwart anything that might happen. Um, there's Picard is less wistful. In the first couple of seasons, he just sort of rambled on about with these random heady, not heady, but these random just thoughts of these dreamy thoughts of stuff. When he's reminiscing about his mom or all that kind of stuff, and it's just like his speeches weren't Picard speeches. They were things that you would read off a Hallmark card, just sort of frothy nonsense. So it was wonderful, so stinking good to come back and see Picard acting like Picard and seeing Riker and then both of them playing off each other very well. And there was that really good scene where in the beginning where Lara says like you and Beverly were lovers, right? And he's what term does he use? Um he uses the term like operative in terms of like have they tried but it didn't work. I think it's just like trying being the operative word. It's like that's Picard. He's not going to go on these wistful tangents. He's going to use that sort of language. That's Picard. And on one level, I don't mind a character in their old age evolving. We all evolve over time. So I don't mind in certain aspects where, like, for example, Picard in this episode's like, I don't need a legacy. And then like there are people like, yeah, but what about generations where you were sad because there's gonna be no more Picards? Well, that was like 30 years ago. Like it was 30 years ago. He hasn't had a kid. There are no more Picards. So at this point, he's probably come to terms with the fact that he's not going to have a legacy. So that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I buy that kind of stuff. That doesn't bother me. So yeah, so this felt like I really felt like, oh my god, I'm actually saying Picard. Same with 7 of 9. I was like, this feels like I'm looking at a however many 30 20 odd years later. This is 7 post Voyager. She's I totally, again, I buy 7 losing a little bit of her Borgness, and that sort of emotion, cold Spockiness that she had, um, and regaining a bit of her humanity. I buy that, but here it's like, okay, yeah, she has that. She is very cool and collected a lot of the times, but there's just this extra kick of humanity behind her that it's well balanced in both episodes. I feel like I'm back with these characters. It's a bit like the motion picture, right? Where it's been 10 years or so since TOS, and everyone is a little bit different, but they're who they are. McCoy is McCoy, Spock is Spock, but actually Spock is a little bit colder because the Kulinar stuff. Kirk he's an admiral. He doesn't have a commission. He really wants a commission. So it's you see those characters, but they're in a different stage of life. But it feels like them, and that's how I felt watching this. I was like, I am back with these characters. They're in a different stage of life. They are slightly different. It makes sense because it's been 20 some odd years since we've seen them. Life changes you. But ultimately, I feel like I am with the same people. Whereas I didn't feel that with seasons 1 and 2. So that was a total win for me. And obviously this shot right here is an interesting nod to the Shinzon's ship, the Scimitar, in Star Trek Nemesis. I do sort of I do sort of giggle at the villains and their ships in the newer movies and the TV shows. They're always so exaggerated. Um, Star Trek 2009 did it. Nero's ship just made no sense. It was so obnoxiously big. Shinzon's ship is the same, and the new ship, as we were just looking at this one, the Shriek, is also just big and menacing and scary. It's a cool design. I'm not knocking the design. It's a very fun design, but it's just a funny trope that's come up in Star Trek over the last few years. So see, episode 1 won me over. Absolutely. Episode 2. Now, sorry, I needed another drink of whiskey. Episode 2. So okay. Here's the thing. Picard season 3 is clearly meant to be watched in one go. However, it's being released weekly. And this is not a criticism of the writing or the editing or anything like that. This is a criticism of streaming. Because streaming, the way you write for streaming now is you're telling one continuous story. Sometimes finding that break in the episode where it's like, this feels like the end of the episode is tricky. I absolutely understand why episode 1 ended where it did. It is a good cliffhanger moment. It's like, oh God, this big giant ship, what's going to happen next? Like, it makes sense to me. It was a good ending. It could have been better. And the real ending for episode 1, in my opinion, is in episode 2. And basically what we get in the beginning of episode 2 is we finally meet our new enemy, right? Vedic, I think her name is. Gotta make sure I'm pronouncing that right. Let me make sure. Vadic, yeah, I was pronouncing that right. Good, Vadic. Now, I really like Amanda Plummer's character so far. Her introduction is she's bonkers, but I like it. And yes, so right, Biffer, you said I abandoned Picard season 3 after the first episode, and we'll check episode 2 because of you. Thank you, Biffer. Thank you very much. Do it, please. I'm going to spoil episode 2 as I talk about it for the next like 20 minutes before as I kind of wind down. I guess if you don't want me to spoil it for you, you can leave and come back, but it's totally up to you on how you feel about spoilers. Amanda Plummer's character, I like. I saw where some people were complaining online, oh, she's really over the top. And I'm like, come on. There's plenty of over the top villains in Star Trek history. From TOS to TNG, Deep Space Nine. There's plenty. I mean, Q is an absurd villain. He's witty and crazy and over the top and stupid sometimes, but I love Q. But Khan is over the top. He's very theatrical. Christopher Plummer, Amanda Plummer's father, who played General Kang in Star Trek 6, was also very theatrical and a little over the top at times. So it's there. It's always been there. Every stinking Klingon is over the top, and crazy. Gul Dukat was an over the top villain, but he was menacing and great. So when I saw complaints like that, I just felt like people are nitpicking at stupid stuff because Amanda Plummer's character is unhinged. She feels unhinged, and I like it. I like this initial introduction to her, and the big moment drops. What we find out when she introduces herself is that she wants Jack Crusher because there's a bounty on his head. And essentially, she tells the Titan, "I'm going to give you 1 hour to hand him over because A, you're not in Federation space. B, you kind of have to give him over to me for whatever reason she comes up with." And so it puts the Titan in this awkward situation where, like, do we comply with this, with this bounty hunter, or do we not? Yeah. And the thing is, this is where I think episode 1 should have ended, because there's this perfect moment. There's this perfect moment where she announces who he is, announces there's a bounty on his head. Um, the camera then focuses on Jack Crusher, and then there's literally the ending is there. There's a punch to a black screen, and I was like, oh my god, that actually should have been the ending. And my reason for that is, while I enjoyed the ending for episode 1, the only thing that I was looking for was just I was yes, seeing this ship confront Beverly's ship indicates the next thing that's going to happen. But I wished, because this is episodic, if this was all available and I was just watching it in one big go, I probably wouldn't have this complaint. But because it's being released weekly, this is why this is in my head. So it's not really a criticism of the writing like that. It's all well written so far. It's just that I think in terms of editing, I would have done it this way, and I would have ended episode 1 where we meet Vatic. She says Jack Crusher is basically a criminal, and there's a bounty on his head, and then we smash that end, and I give you 1 hour to hand him over, and then you smash that ending, because that not only sets up, it brings things to a nice conclusion. It brings things to, you get to, get to Beverly's ship. You find that she's been wounded. You have this initial sort of battle and threat from Vatic and her ship, and then you set up the next big stake, and that is, I want that guy on your ship, and I will destroy you if you don't give him to me. And you're like, oh crap. That's a good ending. That's a good cliffhanger ending, in my opinion. So I would have ended it there. But again, if this whole thing was streaming in one big go, I probably wouldn't even. I probably would pick up on it, because that's just kind of how my brain works with terms of structuring and ending I think about it as I'm writing a book. I think how to end a chapter, where to end the chapter in a right space that kind of leaves you hanging, but tells you enough about kind of what's to come, that kind of thing. So I probably would have done that, but that's me. That's me on that. Let's see, what else was I gonna say? Let's move to the next slide. Then the other the thing that I liked about this episode is Jack Crusher's put off into the brig, because Liam, Captain Shaw's like, dude, this guy's a criminal. I'm not having it. I'm gonna hand him over, because you know what? This ship is not worth sacrificing 500 people for this criminal. And of course, the conflict is, Riker's like, whoa, we don't negotiate with these kind of people. Like, this guy needs to be tried properly. Shaw's also like, Seven, like, what is your problem? Why did you help these people? You've jeopardized your career. I don't trust you as my first officer now. And I think Shaw is making a lot of sense. He really, and this is why I'm really, really liking Shaw, because while I'm also totally on board with Riker and Picard and their mission, I'm also on board with Shaw. I'm like, yeah, no, he's making sense. What he's saying is absolutely fine. He's acknowledging the fact that what Riker and them are doing is reckless and jeopardizes every life on that ship. And they're only doing it because they're doing it for their friend. They're doing it the same reason why Kirk and everyone else stole the Enterprise to go save Spock. Right, they're doing it for their friend, and I love the contradiction and the clash that's happening with these two sets of characters. I think it's really, really stinking good. So yeah, so I really like that. Anyway, Riker gets Picard alone. He's like, all right, we got to talk about this kid. And Picard's like, yes, I will speak to him. I'll find out. And he's like, no, 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 no. Riker's like, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? And Picard's like, oh, don't speculate. And he's like, do the math. Do the math. And again, I saw people complaining about this because ultimately what you find out at the end is that Jack Crusher is actually the son of Picard and Beverly. And it's obvious. It's obvious from the very first episode, the very first time we meet him, where he's like, I'm her son. Riker's like, oh shit. You okay. This is Picard's son. He's like, I can see it. I can see this is Picard's son. Because if you remember, again, Picard was a very actiony guy in his youth before the Nausicaan stabbed him, and he had to have that fake heart, and he sort of had his moment where he kind of stopped being a playboy kind of guy. So again, I saw people complaining about this, like, oh my god, I'm so obvious. Oh my god, it's so obvious. It's like, of course it's obvious. Of course it is. That's the point. Because the one person who is denying it the whole time and isn't interested or maybe is afraid of the answer is Picard. He is constantly avoiding it. No matter what Riker is saying to him, he doesn't want to address it. And I like that. I like that. And in many ways, yes, this is kind of riffing off of Star Trek 2, in which Kirk has his son David. And like, yeah, I get that. But, I like the fact that, the last time Picard ever thought about family or legacy was back in Generations, where he was like, there aren't going to be any more Picards. He has really resigned himself to that. Hence why he's like, I don't need a legacy. He's already got a big enough legacy. He's going to be remembered well after he dies because of everything he's done for Starfleet and blah, 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 blah. But in terms of a family legacy, he's like, I don't need that. He's resigned himself to that, I think. And a part of the reason why I think he's so sort of against addressing parentage of Jack is because, fear, not wanting to necessarily know the truth. And I like that. It's subtle writing, it's subtle stuff. But I think that's part of it. Worf. Okay. The B story continues with Raffi in this where in episode 1 there's a big terrorist attack on a Federation recruitment center, and Raffi speaks to her handler, and she's like, I'm gonna go find out who's behind this, and he's like, no, disengage, don't do it, da, 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 da. And she's like, oh, screw you, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna do it anyway because I'm Raffi. And anyway, so she goes off on this kind of reckless mission to find out who was responsible for the big attack on the recruitment center, and as a result, almost gets herself killed as she's speaking to this Ferengi who is this broker. And again, most of the Raffi scenes I didn't like. Not that I disliked them. I just felt disengaged, which is ironic because that's the name of the episode of episode 2. I was kind of disengaged, but when she is like about to die, yeah, and then you get she takes some drugs. Basically, the Ferengi was like, all right, if you're not really with Starfleet, you're going to take these drugs. And so she takes the drugs, which is kind of an intense moment because she is a druggie. So the fact that the show kind of makes this character do that is interesting. It's interesting, I think. It's just that I don't really care about the character. Anyway, so she's taking the drugs. She's tripping out. Everything's a bit blurry, and she's starting to pass out. And as she does, there's this figure in the background who's just murdering everyone, because they're all about to kill her. So this, and then you kind of see these glimpses, and then Worf picks her up, and he's like, I told you, do not engage. And I was like, oh my god, it was so great to see Worf. It was so great because he comes. Everyone was complaining. Not everyone. People were complaining on the trailer because at one point in the trailer, Worf's like, I prefer pacifism or something like that. And everyone's like, but Worf, Mister Fight Man, and people behind the show were like, can you guys just watch the show and give it a chance? Just give it a chance. And so I love the fact that the first scene that we get with Worf, despite what was in the trailer, is this big scene where he just is slicing and dicing. And it's interesting because in season 1 of Picard, Elnor, the space Legolas, he slices some Romulan's head off with his space sword, and I hated it. It was just it didn't really work. I didn't understand why there was a ninja Romulan. That was just stupid in my opinion. But to see Worf come in and slice someone's head off, just I was like, yeah, that's Worf. That's Worf. They absolutely would have done something like that in TNG or Deep Space Nine, if they could have all those years ago. Because yeah, it just totally makes sense to me. Then at the end, you kind of get to a stalemate where Vadic is like saying, "Hey, I want the kid. I want Jack. Give him to me now, or I'm going to blow you up." And Picard is still kind of not accepted the fact that Jack is his son. So Riker wakes Beverly up in sickbay, brings her to the bridge, and there's this really cool moment where they reference Encounter at Farpoint, where Beverly comes to the bridge for the first time, and behind her is her very annoying son Wesley. I'm not a fan of Wesley Crusher. Sorry, guys. And there's this moment where they just sort of look at each other, and Beverly and Picard have a history, because of Jack Crusher, and he realizes that that's Jack's son, and Jack was his best friend, but he's also had feelings for Beverly. So this complicated moment in the very first episode. We're like, oh, and some tension here. And this scene is replicated quite nicely because she comes to the bridge and he turns around. This is the first time he's seeing her awake, right? And no words are spoken between the they're just looking at each other, and Picard gets it, and he turns to Shaw, who was about ready to hand the kid over, to hand Jack over. He belays the order, and Liam Shaw's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "I can't." He's like, "Why?" He's like, "Because he's my son." And so the penny has dropped for Picard, but he's finally accepted it. The penny dropped for him probably when he first met the kid, but he comes to accept it by the end. And there's this really good moment with so yeah, kind of get the Kirk David thing. It's this really great moment where Shaw sighs, and it's a bit of exasperation, but he's like, okay, fine. The two sort of come together in this moment, and he's like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to fight then. I guess we're gonna have to fight. And Shaw takes the captain's chair. Picard pats him on the shoulder, and Shaw's like, all right, let's get ready to go. And then the Titan fires a few shots at the Shriek and zooms off into the cloud, and the Shriek chases, and then bam, you get to the end. And then again, it was a really good episode. I really have found myself. I've been won over by Picard season 3. I was won over with episode 1. But I like where this story is going. I like these characters. It's fun to have a new captain to like. Shaw's a cool captain. I would totally 1000% watch a Titan series with Shaw as the captain and Seven as the second in command. I think there could be potential for something like that, and I would love to see it. So yeah, I'm absolutely down for something like that. So just by these 2 episodes, you get this interesting character change with Shaw, and you kind of he comes across like a villain in the first episode, but by the end of the second, you're like, no, he's actually being sensible. And after his sort of apprehension, he knows he gets why Picard is doing this now. When Picard says, "No, he's my son," he's like, "Okay, damn it, I get it." And there we go. Now we're waiting for episode 3. So I gotta admit, I'm a fan. I'm won over. I totally, this doesn't mean that I'm watching any of the other shows, because I'm not. I mean, Lower Decks is quite fun. The Deep Space Nine episode of Lower Decks was terrific. But in terms of the other live action stuff, I'm not interested. But I really, so far, I feel like this is a really cool, um, you know, sequel to the Next Generation. I feel like if you watched All Good Things, and even if you skip the films, and this was the next thing you watched, it feels like it connects. It feels like, oh yeah, no, we're catching up with these people, 20, 30 years later. Makes sense. I'm with it. So yeah, there we go. That's my thoughts. Obviously, I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming up with the show. I'm interested to see, to catch up with Geordi and, well, Geordi. Who else is coming out? Yeah, I want to see Geordi. I can't wait for Worf to like finally catch up with Picard. I'm ready. I'm eager for all those people to start coming together. And the other thing that I like also is I do like the restraint. We're 2 episodes in, and we've seen a handful of the original show, original crew, but we haven't seen everybody yet. And I'm fine with them sort of drip drip feeding that out. There's 10 whole episodes. We don't need to see everyone all together all at once straight away. It's fun watching this kind of yeah, lead up to more things and whatnot. But yeah, damn good. A couple more things in the chat. You're welcome, Biffer. Thanks for tuning in. Yes, if Cisco or Janeway comes back, I will faint. That would be insane. I would love that. I don't think Cisco will ever come back. I don't think Avery Brooks will come back. I would love for him to. I would love to see. I don't know if you ever saw the documentary What We Left Behind, which was a Deep Space Nine documentary, kind of looking back on the history of the show. In that documentary, they did a mock writers room with the original crew who produced the show, and in that they did a beat outline of what would be the first episode of a hypothetical season 8. And again, in terms of my head canon, I'm like that's legit. I see that. I feel like I've seen the first episode of season 8 of Deep Space Nine, and I have an idea what that season would have been like, and what Cisco's return would have been like, and I'm all for it, but I doubt it'll happen. I think I heard or read or saw somewhere that Janeway is like contracted only to the that kids show, that Star Trek kids show. So I don't know, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if there are other surprise is in the rest of this season. I think there very well could be. And I'm excited to see it. But yeah, Bifford, do check out the rest the next episode. I think it's good. I think it's good. I'm excited to see where it goes. This is the first time in years that I've been excited about Star Trek. Like legit. I feel like I'm actually watching Star Trek again, and excited to see where this goes. So anyway, that's it. I've said about all I need to say about Star Trek Picard episodes 1 and 2. I'm not going to come back every week and talk about this. I will probably wait another 2 or 3 weeks and watch another 2 to 3 episodes and then come back and talk about them all in one go. Because I don't know. I don't want to do it every week. I got things I got to do, so I can't always come back and do this. But I thought I had the time tonight to do this, so I'm glad I could ramble on for 2 hours. 2 hours by myself talking about Star Trek Picard. God, I'm a nerd. I don't give a shit. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, tell your friends about the show. because that would be cool. I have some really cool guests coming up in the future. March is going to be a crazy fun month. Starting off March with a chat with Matthew Booth, crime writer, talking about the film Chinatown. That's happening this coming Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. GMT. That's going to be a lot of fun. Then I'm bringing on Ian Rankin on March 8th. He's a massive crime writer, writer of the John Rebus series set in Edinburgh. He's he's an incredible writer, really cool dude. We're having a conversation about his favorite books and favorite music, and that's gonna be a lot of fun. So I would say come back for that. And then on March 22nd, I have a Star Trek related guest. I'll tell you now. I'll tell you now because let's face it, there's not a lot of people listening at the moment. But I am bringing Nicholas Meyer on the show for having a night in conversation. We're going to be talking about some of his Sherlock Holmes books, including 7% Solution and his most recent, The Return of the Pharaoh. But we're also going to be talking about his time working on Star Trek II and Star Trek VI. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So, again, tell your friends because that'll be fun. Anyway, I'm going to go now because it's not that late, but I've said all I have to say. So I will see you Wednesday for a chat about Chinatown and all that kind of stuff. So enjoy your evening. Alrighty, I'm going to go. Bye.